All right, welcome back to Clay and Buck. As promised, we have with us now the governor of Florida. He is also running in the Republican presidential primary. Governor DeSantis, thanks so much for being with us.
Hey, how y'all doing?
We're good, sir. We're good. Tell us how you feel this point in the race. A lot of polls out there, a lot of people asking questions. I know you had to take some of those questions over the weekend over at Fox from Maria Bartiromo. What do you think your campaign's doing right, and what are you looking to do more of? What are you going to change?
Well, it's interesting. It's pretty clear, and not just in the recent weeks. I mean, really, since we won re-election by so much last November, we have been the target of the corporate media. They clearly do not want me to be the nominee, and I think it's because they know that I would beat Biden soundly. But more importantly than that, they know that I will actually accomplish the big things that we know need to be accomplished in this country. You know, we'll shut down the border, we'll reverse Biden economics, we'll do all the things that so many Americans want to see done. So that's all part of their narrative, and they're going to continue doing that, no matter what happens. Look, the way we view it is you're competing in individual contests. There's not a national primary, there's state by state. And so we've worked really hard to develop the type of support on the grassroots level in places like Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, that really can propel a candidate to victory. I think we've already announced 37 Iowa state legislators, including some of the leaders in both the House and Senate. We've got conservative activists, faith leaders, all these important people that can help bring this message to bear. And so a lot of over the summer, we always anticipated would we be doing a lot of that laborious work that isn't as newsworthy maybe, but ultimately that's what leads to I think, a winning campaign. And so we're excited about the progress. We understand that there's a lot more to do, but we are focusing on how you actually accumulate the delegates rather than kind of the national stuff that gets put out there, which, as you know, we don't have a national primary.
I know that you even read court opinions. I'm told by your staff for fun, which is a law school nerd thing that I think you've kept up with. And sometimes I do the same. And on July 4th, we had, I think, one of the most consequential federal court rulings of the entire COVID era, with the Judge Dowdy opinion about Biden coordination as it pertained to censorship relating to COVID, relating to so many different issues. As president, how important is this issue? Because I actually think it's maybe the most important. If we can't say what we actually think and our government's trying to censor us, what did you think of that opinion? What needs to happen to keep the federal government out of censoring the political opinions of anybody, Democrat, Republican, or independent in your mind?
Well, the decision was right on target. I mean, as you guys know, the federal government cannot censor speech. It's a First Amendment. That's the core of it. And so we know that. And so just as they could not do a law to say you can't oppose COVID lockdowns or you can't oppose mask mandates, they can't subcontract out that censorship to private entities. That's still every bit as much a violation of the First Amendment if they're doing indirectly what they cannot do directly. So I don't think the court could have come to any other conclusion. Now, in Florida, we've actually taken legislative action to prevent state and local government employees from colluding with tech companies or any media company for the purpose of censoring speech. And we think that that's an important line in the sand that needs to be drawn, and you have to hold people accountable if they cross that line in the sand. So we will do something similar. Maybe we get Congress to do, but I don't even know if you need to do that. We will make it very clear that as president, when you're working with tech companies to try to stifle dissent, you are abusing your power and you are infringing on the constitutional rights of American citizens, and you will be shown the door. You got to start firing these malevolent bureaucrats. You can't just let them continue to take more and more of our freedom. And I agree with you guys. This is a fundamental issue because the left ultimately wants to dominate every institution in this country, and they have dominated a lot of them up to this point, not in Florida because we fought back, but across the country. And they want to impose an orthodoxy. And so back during COVID, if you posted an article in those early days criticizing lockdowns, tech companies would pull it down. We had one of our YouTube videos. I had a panel of eminent scientists, people like Dr. Bhattacharya from Stanford early in COVID saying kids needed to be in school and they should not be forced to mask. Google, YouTube took that video down. So there was a concerted effort to use massive amounts of power, both corporate and government, to impose an official narrative on the country. And first of all, that's just not what a free society is all about. But it's also, as you guys know, the official narrative coming out of our elites is almost always wrong, and it's almost always destructive to a healthy society.
Governor DeSantis, Bidenomics is something that's being talked about by the regime in power right now. President Biden offering up a version of what the economy is. What's your sense of what's going on right now in the U.S. economy, and what would you do if you were president to get things going the way they should be?
So Bidenomics basically means you pay more for everything, your standard of living goes down, ultimately to the benefit of places like communist China. But it's important to identify kind of where all this goes back to. You know, the root of this was the COVID lockdowns and the Fauciism. And then they did the massive $2 trillion spending plan, borrow spending $2 trillion in March of 2020. You had a massive printing of money by the Federal Reserve. Then December of 2020, another 2.2 trillion. Then March of 2021, Biden did 2 trillion, and they've done more and more and more. You cannot inject that much borrowing, printing, and spending into the economy and not have persistent inflation. So they were warned about doing this, and yet they barreled ahead with it anyways. And so this has really been a government-induced economic problem crisis in terms of affordability. And so one of the things you got to do, one, we're going to reverse Bidenomics, which is basically the politicization of the economy. They want things like ESG. They want the Green New Deal. They want you to have to bend a knee to left-wing ideology to be able to participate in the economy. That's not going to work, and it's going to mean less freedom for everybody and a lower standard of living. So we will do that. But we've got to ensure that the Congress is not allowed to spend like drunken sailors. When they spend at this level, you are just not going to end up having inflation be where it needs to be. We're now 50% more in terms of spending on federal agencies than just 2019 alone. Does anybody out there feel like they're that much better off because the bureaucracy has grown so much and these agencies, failed agencies like CDC and NIH, have been stuffed with more borrowed money? No, everybody knows this has been a colossal waste, but it's had huge impact on the economy. We're also going to open up American domestic energy production. It's good for our national security to be energy independent. It's good for our industrial base to be permitting more pipelines, have more projects underway. It's absolutely good for jobs as well. And it will help reduce inflation, because if you look about where energy is factored into this, Biden basically squandered a lot of the strategic petroleum reserve, which artificially kept the price a little lower than it otherwise would have been. Time may be running out on that, and you may see spikes in energy. And if that's the case, inflation will go back up again. So I think that that's really, really important. And then you also need to rip out the bureaucratic excess. Yes, part of it is the weaponization and the deep state, but it's also just a massive, massive overreach of these bureaucrats where they want to tell you what kind of car you can drive. They want to tell you what kind of energy you can use with never having stood for election and not accountable to the American people. It's a distortion of constitutional government. It's also terrible for economic growth.
Last question for you. We know you're busy making your case all over the country. Not front page, I don't think, but a big article in the Wall Street Journal. The headline is, Disney World hasn't felt this empty in years. Says July 4th, 10-year low. They're having trouble getting people to show up at Disney World and Disneyland. The movies, and I know you got young kids, the movies that they've been putting out, the Pixar movies are collapsing. Even the recent Indiana Jones did not do well. Do you think Disney is getting Bud Lighted by many people out there? If you were giving them advice on what would make sense going forward from a business perspective, it feels to me like Disney has gone woke and Bob Iger is now paying the consequences. Do you see it that way?
Well, I'll tell you, as parents of 6, 5, and 3-year-old kids, my wife and I really believe that parents should be able to send their kids to school, let them watch cartoons without having an agenda shoved down their throat. That's why we stood up to Disney with respect to our Parents' Rights in Education bill. And I think that it is impacting parents' willingness to want to take their kids to the Disney stuff. The sad part about it, guys, is when we were having this fight with Disney in 2022, most of the employees in their Orlando area theme parks, they agreed with us. I won Osceola County for the first time a Republican's done in a generation by 7%, which is where the majority of Disney employees live. So this is really a cadre of woke executives in Burbank trying to impose this agenda down on the rest of the company. I think it's been catastrophic. My advice would just be, look, what made Disney kind of the all-American company under Walt and beyond was a focus on family, a focus on traditional pro-American values. They would never have wanted to sexualize children the way Disney has gone down this. So they just have to look in the mirror, understand, first of all, it's wrong. Second of all, people aren't buying this. And it is ultimately to the detriment of the company. It's in the best interest of Disney shareholders that they get refocused on their previous core mission and get the woke out of there. And it goes beyond, when you start talking about kids, because some of the woke in society is kind of annoying and sometimes you just kind of roll your eyes. When you start talking about our kids, that's when parents really, really rise up and respond. And I think it's sad that that's the case, but they have knowingly chosen to go down this road. And I can tell you in Florida, we're one of the few places where we've stood up to these woke companies in defense of parents and children. I get criticized by a lot of Republicans for having done that, but I'll tell you, I would do it again, and it was the right thing to do.
Governor Ron DeSantis, thanks for being with us, sir, and good luck to you out there.
All right, take care, guys.